The stars belonged to the Kithrans now. At least that was what War Commander Zethkar believed as he stood in the command center of his massive ship. Through the viewing window, he watched another world burn. Orange flames danced across the surface of what used to be a beautiful planet covered in blue oceans and green forests. Now it was just another conquest. Zethkar had been doing this for over 50 years. His tall gray body moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. His forearms worked smoothly across the control panels, while his large, black eyes studied the data flowing across the screens. The numbers always told the same story. Victory. Complete victory. Report, he said to his second-in-command, a younger Kithran named Veltar. The Altarians have surrendered, War Commander. Their main cities are under our control. Resistance has stopped. Veltar's voice carried the same cold tone that all Kithrans used when discussing conquered worlds. Zethkar nodded. The blue-skinned Altarians had put up more of a fight than most species, but it had not mattered. Their ships were fast, and their pilots were brave, but they could not match Kithran technology. Energy shields that could stop any weapon, plasma cannons that could melt entire mountains, mind control devices that turned enemies into servants. How long did it take? Zethkar asked. 6 hours and 23 minutes from first contact to surrender. Slower than usual. Zethkar made a note in his personal files. The Altarians would be marked as a species that required extra monitoring. Not that it would matter much. Within a year, they would be just like all the others. Quiet, obedient, useful. The Kithran Empire had been growing for 300 years. Zethkar remembered the stories his grandfather told him about the early days, when they had to fight hard for each new world. Those times were long gone. Now conquest was a simple process that followed the same steps every time. First, scout ships would find a new world with intelligent life. They would study the species for a few months, learning about their technology and military strength. Then the war fleet would arrive and offer the standard choice: surrender and serve the Empire, or face complete destruction. Most species chose to surrender. The smart ones did it quickly, before the Kithrans had to demonstrate their power. The stubborn ones usually changed their minds after watching a few of their cities disappear in bright flashes of plasma fire. Bring up the next target, Zethkar ordered. The main screen changed to show a star map. Red dots marked worlds that belonged to the Empire. Blue dots showed worlds that had been discovered but not yet conquered. There were always more blue dots, appearing as scout ships pushed deeper into unexplored space. Veltar pointed to a cluster of blue dots near the edge of the map. Intelligence reports several interesting worlds in this sector. One species appears to be spread across multiple planets in the same system. They call themselves humans. Zethkar studied the data. The humans controlled one main world called Earth, plus smaller colonies on nearby planets and moons. Their technology seemed average. Chemical rockets instead of proper faster-than-light drives. Metal ships instead of energy-based hulls. Primitive. Weapons that threw small pieces of metal at high speed. Any special concerns? He asked. Nothing unusual, War Commander. They appear to be divided into many small nations that fight among themselves. Standard pre-unification behavior. Our analysts predict easy conquest within 12 hours of first contact. Zethkar almost smiled. Almost. Kithrans did not show emotion the way other species did, but he felt the familiar satisfaction that came before a new victory. Divided species were always the easiest to conquer. While they argued with each other, the Empire could destroy them piece by piece. He looked at the other recent conquests displayed on the walls of his command center. The artistic Morphians who had created beautiful sculptures right up until the moment they surrendered. The peaceful Vecti, whose philosophers had written long essays about the meaninglessness of violence while their world was being invaded. The hard-working Zelani, who had tried to bargain for their freedom by offering to build things for the Empire. All of them had one thing in common. They had believed that intelligence, art, philosophy, or hard work would save them. None of them had understood the simple truth that the Kithrans had learned long ago. Power was the only thing that mattered in the universe. Not wisdom, not beauty, not even unity. Just pure overwhelming power. Set course for the human system, Zethkar commanded. Standard invasion protocol. We will offer surrender terms upon arrival. Yes, War Commander. As the great ship turned toward its new destination, Zethkar walked to his private quarters. The walls were covered with trophies from his many victories. A crystal sculpture from the Morphians, a philosophical text from the Vecti, a perfectly crafted tool from the Zelani. Each item represented a species that had thought they were special, that had believed they could stand against the might of the Empire. He opened his personal files and began reading about humans. They were mammals, like many species the Empire had conquered. They lived short lives, maybe 80 years if they were lucky. They fought constantly among themselves over resources, territory, and ideas. Their weapons were crude but effective against each other. One report caught his attention. Human history was filled with wars, not just the small conflicts that most species had, but massive wars that involved their entire planet. They had invented increasingly deadly weapons over time, eventually creating bombs that could destroy whole cities in single explosions. Some human nations had thousands of these weapons. Veltar had been wrong about one thing. The humans were not really divided anymore. Oh, they still had different nations and governments, but they had formed something called the United Earth Defense Force just 50 years ago. Intelligence suggested this was a response to discovering that other intelligent species existed in the galaxy. Zethkar found this mildly interesting but not concerning. Many species tried to unite when they learned about the Empire. It never helped. The Altarians had been completely united when the invasion began. The Vecti had achieved perfect planetary peace centuries before first contact. Unity did not matter when facing superior technology and overwhelming force. He closed the files and prepared for sleep. In a few days, they would reach the human system. In a few days, he would add another trophy to his collection, perhaps a human weapon of some kind, or maybe one of their primitive art pieces. War Commander Zethkar had conquered 47 worlds in his career. Soon, it would be 48. The thought gave him the closest thing to happiness that his species could feel. Outside his window, the stars continued their ancient dance. Most of them already belonged to the Empire. Soon, all of them would. It was just a matter of time, patience, and the careful application of superior force. The humans would learn what every other species had learned. Resistance was pointless. The Kithran Empire always won. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking coffee when the sensors picked up the alien ships. The hot liquid went down the wrong way as he read the data coming across his screen. 12 massive vessels had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. All hands to battle stations, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. Around him, the bridge of the UES Defiance came alive with activity. Officers ran to their positions while red warning lights flashed throughout the ship. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the alien fleet," reported Communications Officer Betty Walsh, her fingers moving quickly over her controls. "It's in English, but the grammar is strange." "Put it through." The main screen filled with the image of a tall, gray creature with 4 arms and large black eyes. When it spoke, its voice was cold and emotionless. "I am War Commander Zethkar of the Kithran Empire. Your species will surrender immediately. Serve the Empire willingly, or your world will be destroyed. You have 1 of your hours to decide." The transmission ended, leaving silence on the bridge. Jake had been expecting this day for years, ever since humanity had detected radio signals from other star systems. The United Earth Defense Force had been created specifically to handle first contact with hostile aliens. "Get me Admiral Harper at Luna Command," Jake ordered. Within minutes, Admiral Lisa Harper's face appeared on the screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had started her career as a fighter pilot and worked her way up through every rank. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her blue eyes were already calculating strategies. "Jake, I see them too. 12 ships, estimated size between 1 and 2 kilometers each. Our long-range scans show energy signatures we've never seen before. Orders, Admiral?" "Buy us time. I'm scrambling every ship we have. but it will take 6 hours to get a proper fleet together. Keep them talking if you can. If not, make them. Fight for every inch, Jake nodded. The Defiance was one of only 3 human ships currently in the outer system. Against 12 alien vessels, the odds were not good. But humans had fought against bad odds before. All ships, this is Morrison, form up on the Defiance. We're going to show these aliens what happens when they threaten Earth. The 3 human ships moved into formation near Jupiter's largest moon. Compared to the massive alien vessels approaching them, they looked like insects facing elephants. But these insects had stingers. War Commander Zethkar watched the primitive human ships take position. Their formations were sloppy compared to proper Kithran military standards. Their vessels were small and crude, built from simple metals instead of advanced composites. This would be even easier than the Altarian conquest. Launch fighters, he commanded. Disable their ships. We will take prisoners for questioning. Dozens of small Kithran attack craft swarmed out of the larger ships. They moved in perfect formation, their energy weapons charging for non-lethal attacks. The war commander had learned that some species fought harder when they thought their people would be killed. Better to capture them alive and demonstrate the Empire's mercy. The human response surprised him. Instead of fleeing or trying to maintain formation, the 3 ships split apart and began moving in erratic patterns. Their smaller weapons fired continuously, filling space with streams of metal projectiles and primitive missiles. Fascinating, observed Veltar. They appear to be using kinetic weapons exclusively. No energy shields, no plasma cannons. This will be over quickly. One of the Kithran fighters exploded suddenly, torn apart by a lucky hit from human weapons. Then another. The humans were not trying to engage in proper military combat. They were swarming like angry insects, firing everything they had and relying on speed and confusion instead of tactics. Captain Jake Morrison gritted his teeth as his ship shook under alien fire. The Kithrans had energy weapons that could punch through the Defiance's armor like it was paper, but they seemed to be holding back. That was their first mistake. "Danny, now," Jake shouted into his radio. Captain Danny Walsh, commanding the destroyer UES Vengeance, had been waiting for that signal. His ship was already badly damaged, leaking air and losing power. Instead of retreating, he did something that no Kithran had ever seen in 300 years of conquest. He aimed his crippled ship directly at the nearest alien vessel and pushed his engines to maximum power. "What is he doing?" Veltar asked, staring at the human ship that was accelerating straight toward them. War Commander Zethkar understood a moment too late. Evasive maneuvers. The human is attempting a ramming attack. The Vengeance crashed into the Kithran cruiser's shield generator in the explosion of metal and fire. Both ships were destroyed instantly, but the alien vessel's protective shields went down. For the first time in centuries, a Kithran warship was vulnerable. Jake Morrison did not waste the opportunity. "All weapons, target that ship, pour everything we have into it." The concentrated fire from 2 human ships tore into the unprotected alien vessel. The Kithrans had never needed strong armor because their shields had always been enough. Without that protection, their ship began to break apart under the primitive but effective human weapons. Inside his command center, War Commander Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. The humans were fighting in ways that made no sense. They sacrificed their own ships, used kamikaze attacks, and seemed to prefer chaos over proper military order. "War Commander, we're detecting more human vessels approaching from the inner system," reported his sensor officer. Zethkar looked at the display. Dozens of human ships were burning hard toward the battle. Most were small, probably civilian vessels that had been quickly armed with weapons. Some were clearly military ships, but even those were tiny compared to Kithran standards. What disturbed him most was how they moved. Kithran fleets advanced in perfect formation, maintaining proper distances and following established attack patterns. The human fleet looked like a mob of angry animals, each ship moving independently and firing at any target in range. Admiral Lisa Harper arrived with the first wave of reinforcements. Her flagship, the UES Constitution, was an old ship that had been built for exploration rather than war, but her crew had been preparing for this day for 20 years. All ships, this is Harper. Forget everything they taught you about space combat. These aliens have better technology, but they fight like robots. Be unpredictable. Take risks. Make them react to us instead of following their plan. The battle spread across millions of kilometers of space. Human ships darted between the larger alien vessels, firing missiles and then retreating before the Kithrans could respond. When the aliens tried to corner them, the humans would suddenly change direction or split their forces in ways that defied military logic. Marine Colonel Amy Foster led the most daring attack of the battle. Her assault transport, the UES Ranger, managed to get close enough to one of the damaged Kithran ships to launch boarding pods. No species had ever attempted to board an Empire vessel during combat. The Marines who stormed through the alien ship's corridors were a shock to the Kithrans. Inside, they wore powered armor that let them move faster and hit harder than normal humans. They used weapons that fired exploding bullets and threw grenades that released clouds of deadly gas. But what really terrified the aliens was how the humans fought. They smiled while shooting. They laughed when they took hits. Some of them even sang war songs as they advanced through the ship's hallways. The Kithrans had conquered hundreds of species, but they had never faced warriors who enjoyed combat. Most civilized beings fought only when they had to, and surrendered when the situation became hopeless. These humans seemed to fight harder when things got worse. After 6 hours of battle, War Commander Zethkar made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. He ordered his fleet to retreat. As the surviving alien ships fled toward the edge of the solar system, Admiral Harper stood on her damaged bridge and smiled. Humanity had won its first victory against the Kithran Empire. But more importantly, they had learned something about their enemy. The aliens could be beaten. 6 months after the first battle, General Marcus Stone stood in the war room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The walls were covered with star maps showing Kithran territory. Red lines marked their supply routes. Blue dots showed worlds that had been conquered. Green marks indicated possible targets for human attacks. Operation Prometheus is ready to begin, Marcus announced to the assembled officers. Around the table sat the best military minds humanity had to offer. Admiral Lisa Harper, Marine Colonel Amy Foster, and Captain Jake Morrison had all earned their places through blood and courage in the first battle. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Instead of waiting for the Kithrans to attack Earth again, humanity would take the fight to them. Human fleets would strike at alien strongholds throughout their territory, freeing conquered worlds and disrupting the Empire's control. Intelligence reports from our captured prisoners indicate 3 major targets, Marcus continued, pointing to the star map. Nexus Station is their main military base. Vega Prime holds millions of enslaved Altarians, and the Zalani homeworld has been turned into a weapons factory. Engineer Sarah Blake spoke up from her position near the technical displays. The shield breaker system is ready for deployment. We can now disable their energy shields in less than 30 seconds. Sarah had spent the last 6 months studying captured Kithran technology. Her breakthrough had come when she realized their shields used a frequency that could be disrupted by electromagnetic pulse weapons. Humans had developed EMP technology decades ago for destroying enemy electronics during wars on Earth. Communications Officer Tony Rodriguez added his report. We've been intercepting alien messages for months. Their military codes are complex, but they follow predictable patterns. I can give our fleets advance warning about enemy movements. Tony had discovered something interesting about Kithran communications. They were incredibly secure, but also very formal. Every message followed exact rules and procedures. This made them hard to break, but also predictable once you understood the system. Captain Jake Morrison studied the battle plans spread across the table. Nexus Station will be the hardest target. It's heavily defended and sits in the middle of their territory, but destroying it would cripple their ability to coordinate attacks. That's why we're hitting it first, Marcus replied. Hard and fast, before they know what's happening. Jake, you'll command the assault fleet. 12 ships, including the new heavy cruiser Retribution. Jake nodded. The Retribution was humanity's answer to Kithran firepower. Built in the orbital shipyards around Mars, it carried enough weapons to fight a small war by itself. More importantly, it was equipped with Sarah's shieldbreaker technology. Admiral Harper looked at the second target. Vega Prime will be tricky. We need to free the Altarian prisoners without getting them killed in the crossfire. Amy, think your Marines can handle close combat in an alien city? Colonel Amy Foster grinned. My people have been training for this. We've learned a lot about Kithran weaknesses from interrogating prisoners. They're not used to fighting inside buildings or in tight spaces. We can use that against them. Amy had been working with Dr. Helen Chang, a psychologist who had studied the captured aliens. The Kithrans were logical and methodical, but they had trouble adapting when their careful plans fell apart. Human chaos and improvisation consistently confused them. What about the third target? Asked Captain Kelly Murphy, who would be leading a squadron of fighters in the operation. Marcus pointed to the Zalani homeworld. The aliens have turned the entire planet into a weapons factory. If we can take it intact, we gain access to Kithran. Manufacturing technology. Plus, we free another enslaved species. The meeting continued for hours as they refined the details. Each attack had to be coordinated perfectly. Strike too early, and the other targets would be warned. Strike too late and reinforcements might arrive. 3 weeks later, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution as his fleet approached Nexus Station. The alien base was enormous, a metal structure the size of a small moon floating in empty space. Energy shields flickered around it like a soap bubble, protecting thousands of Kithran ships and personnel. Range to target? Jake asked. 2 million kilometers and closing, reported his weapons officer. All ships begin the attack run. Sarah, your show. Engineer Sarah Blake activated the shield breaker from her position on the Retribution's bridge. The device sent out a powerful electromagnetic pulse that spread across space like ripples in a pond. When it hit the station's shields, they flickered and died. Shields are down, Sarah announced. Window is open for approximately 10 minutes before they can restore power. The human fleet opened fire immediately. Missiles and energy beams lanced across space, striking the unprotected station. Explosions bloomed across its surface as weapons, platforms, and docking bays were destroyed. Kithran ships began launching from the station's hangars, but they flew into a storm of human weapons fire. The aliens tried to form their usual perfect formations, but the humans attacked from multiple directions at once, making coordinated defense impossible. Jake watched as one of the station's main reactors exploded in a brilliant flash of light. All ships concentrate fire on the central hub. Let's finish this. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. When it was over, Nexus Station was a broken wreck drifting through space. The explosion had been visible from 3 star systems away, a message to every enslaved world that the Kithran Empire could be defeated. On Vega Prime, Colonel Amy Foster led her Marines through the streets of the main city. The Kithran garrison had not expected a ground assault. Their energy weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not fighting in narrow alleyways and ruined buildings. Second platoon, take the government center, Amy ordered over her radio. Third platoon, secure the prisoner camps. Watch for civilian casualties. The Marines moved through the city like ghosts, using stealth and speed to avoid large enemy forces. When they did fight, they used tactics the Kithrans had never seen. Soldiers would pop up from sewers, fire a few shots, then disappear again. Others would climb buildings and attack from above. The freed Altarian prisoners joined the fight as soon as they were released. They knew the city better than anyone, and could guide human forces through hidden passages and secret routes. Their blue skin made them easy to distinguish from the gray Kithrans, preventing friendly fire incidents. Within hours, the capital city was in human hands. Similar attacks across the planet freed millions of enslaved Altarians and captured most of the Kithran occupation force. The attack on the Zalani homeworld went even better. The industrious aliens had been secretly sabotaging their own weapons, production for months waiting for someone to liberate them. When human ships appeared in orbit, Zalani workers across the planet rose up against their guards. Communications officer Tony Rodriguez intercepted desperate Kithran messages calling for help. The aliens were panicking as reports came in from all 3 target systems. Their military commanders could not understand how humans had coordinated attacks across such vast distances. Their whole communication network is in chaos, Tony reported to General Stone. They're pulling ships from other sectors to reinforce these positions, which leaves more worlds vulnerable to attack. The human strategy was working. By striking multiple targets at once, they had forced the Kithrans to react instead of planning their own operations. The Empire's rigid military structure, which had been their strength for centuries, was becoming their weakness. War Commander Zethkar received the reports in his command ship near the edge of Kithran space. 3 major defeats in one day. Thousands of ships destroyed or captured. Millions of prisoners freed. It was the worst military disaster in Empire history. For the first time since the war began, Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not just fear of defeat, but fear that everything he believed about Kithran's superiority might be wrong. Admiral Lisa Harper stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UES Liberation, as the largest human fleet ever assembled approached the Kithran home system. Behind her stretched a line of ships that seemed to go on forever. Human vessels flew, alongside Altarian science ships, Zilani engineering craft, and even some converted Kithran vessels captured in earlier battles. "Final count, Admiral," reported her communications officer. 237 ships representing 12 different species, all ready for the final push. Lisa nodded, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. The war that had started with humanity's desperate defense of Earth was about to end at the heart of the Kithran Empire. Win or lose, this battle would determine the future of the galaxy. "Agent Carter, what's the status of our contacts on the surface?" she asked. Agent Steve Carter had spent months building spy networks throughout Kithran space. His teams had made contact with rebel groups on dozens of worlds, all waiting for the signal to rise up against their oppressors. "Resistance cells are ready on 43 worlds," Steve reported. "The moment we engage their home fleet, rebellions will begin across the Empire. They won't be able to send reinforcements." The plan was ambitious, but necessary. Instead of just attacking the Kithran homeworld, humanity would coordinate uprisings throughout the Empire. The aliens would have to choose between defending their capital or holding on to their conquered territories. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the heavy assault group from his position on the battleship Retribution. The massive ship had been upgraded with every piece of captured alien technology that human engineers could understand. Its weapons could punch through the strongest Kithran shields, and its armor could withstand anything the Empire had. "Jake, you'll lead the first wave," Admiral Harper ordered over the fleet communications. "Your job is to break their outer defenses and clear a path for the main fleet." "Understood, Admiral. We'll give them a fight they won't forget." The Kithran home system was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Hundreds of orbital platforms surrounded the planet, each one bristling with weapons. The planet's surface was protected by energy shields that could stop asteroid impacts. Thousands of ships patrolled the system in perfect formations. War Commander Zethkar waited for the human fleet from his command post on the largest orbital station. Around him, his officers worked frantically to coordinate the defense. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an enemy that might actually win. "How many ships are approaching?" he asked his sensor officer. "Scanners show at least 200 vessels, War Commander, but many are of unknown design. The humans appear to have allied with multiple species." Zethkar felt his confidence waver. The Empire's strength had always come from keeping conquered species separate and powerless. The idea that they might work together had never been considered. All defensive platforms prepare to fire. All ships maintain formation. We will show these primitives the true power of the Empire. The battle began when the human fleet reached the edge of the system. Jake Morrison's assault group charged straight at the main defensive line, their ships weaving between energy blasts like dancers avoiding raindrops. Behind them, the rest of the fleet spread out in a formation that looked chaotic, but was actually carefully planned. "All ships execute Pattern 7, Admiral Harper commanded. Pattern 7 was something human strategists had developed specifically for this battle. Instead of attacking in waves like most military forces, the entire fleet would hit different targets simultaneously. The Kithrans would have to divide their attention among dozens of separate battles. Engineer Sarah Blake watched her displays as shield breaker devices throughout the fleet began firing. The electromagnetic pulses spread across the system like invisible lightning striking orbital platforms and ships. One by one, the alien defensive shields flickered and died. Shields down on platforms 7 through 15, Sarah reported. Window is open for 8 minutes. Human ships immediately swarmed the unprotected platforms. Fighters led by Captain Kelly Murphy darted between the massive structures, placing explosives on critical systems. Larger ships pounded them with everything they had. On the planet's surface, the rebellions began exactly as planned. Altarian scientists sabotaged Kithran communication networks. Zilani workers seized weapons factories and began producing equipment for the rebels. Former prisoners across dozens of worlds attacked their guards and took control of key installations. Colonel Amy Foster led the most daring assault of the war. Her Marines used captured alien transport ships to land directly on the planet's surface, right in the middle of the capital city. Their mission was to capture the Imperial Palace and force the Kithran leadership to surrender. The fighting in the city streets was unlike anything the Kithrans had ever experienced. Human soldiers seemed to appear from nowhere, strike hard, then vanish again. They used the city's own buildings as weapons, collapsing structures to block alien reinforcements or creating sniper positions in ruined towers. Second Company, secure the government district, Amy ordered as her troops advanced through the burning city. Third Company, take the communication center. We need to cut off their ability to coordinate resistance. The Marines were not alone in their fight. Thousands of former slaves had joined the rebellion, providing local knowledge and extra fighters. The Altarians knew which buildings had hidden passages. The Zilani understood which systems were most important to disable. Even some Kithrans had turned against their own government, disgusted by centuries of conquest and oppression. War Commander Zethkar watched his perfect defenses crumble from his command center. The humans were not just defeating his forces, they were doing it in ways that made no military sense. Ships attacked in random patterns. Ground forces ignored strategic objectives to rescue prisoners. The entire human war effort seemed driven by emotion rather than logic. War Commander, the Imperial Palace is under attack, reported one of his aides. Marine forces have breached the outer walls. Send the Palace Guard to stop them. Sir, the Palace Guard has surrendered. They are laying down their weapons, rather than fight the humans. Zethkar stared at his aide in shock. Kithran soldiers did not surrender. They fought to the death or achieved victory. The idea that trained warriors would give up without a fight was impossible to understand. The final blow came when Admiral Harper's flagship broke through the last line of orbital defenses. The Liberation, supported by ships from a dozen different species, entered orbit around the Kithran homeworld. For the first time in their history, the planet that had ruled a galactic empire was defenseless. This is Admiral Harper of the United Earth Defense Force, Lisa broadcast on all frequencies. To the government of the Kithran Empire, your military forces have been defeated. Your conquered worlds have been liberated. Further resistance will only bring more destruction to your people. In the Imperial Palace, Colonel Amy Foster and her Marines had fought their way to the throne room. War Commander Zethkar was there, but he was not alone. Representatives from every species the Empire had conquered stood with the human soldiers. The blue-skinned Altarians, the industrious Zilani, the artistic Morphians, and dozens of others. War Commander Zethkar, Amy said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. By the authority of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, you are under arrest for crimes against sentient beings. Zethkar looked around the room at the faces of species he had helped to conquer. Some showed anger, others showed pity, but none showed fear. For 3 centuries, the Kithran Empire had ruled through terror. Now that terror was gone, I surrender, he said quietly. The war was over, but the peace was just beginning. In the months that followed, representatives from all the liberated worlds met on Earth to form something new, the Galactic Federation. Unlike the Empire, membership was voluntary. Unlike the old system, every species had an equal voice. Admiral Lisa Harper, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, spoke at the founding ceremony. "We did not fight to build a new empire. We fought so that every species could choose its own path among the stars. The Federation's first act was to offer membership to the Kithrans themselves. Many refused, bitter about their defeat. But some, including former war commander Zethkar, chose to join the new alliance. They had learned something that their empire had forgotten. Cooperation was stronger than conquest. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the Federation's peacekeeping fleet, patrolled the galaxy in ships crewed by members of a dozen different species. The old boundaries between conqueror and conquered had disappeared, replaced by something unprecedented in galactic history: genuine cooperation between equals. The galaxy had entered a new age, one where freedom was not something to be won through war, but something to be shared through peace.